The rain that night didn't just fall, it roared. It slammed against the pavement in thick sheets, drumming against the windshield of Nurse Amara Johnson's car like impatient fingers. She had just finished a double shift at St. Cecilia's Hospital, her scrubs damp from the long, thankless night. The streets were empty, the kind of quiet that makes you uneasy. Streetlights flickered as if even electricity was afraid of the storm. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her wipers fighting a losing battle. Then, out of the blur of water and fog, something moved. A shape. Small. Still. Standing by the old bus stop near the abandoned gas station. At first, she thought it was a dog. Then the lightning flashed, and she saw the outline of a child. Her heart skipped. What on earth would a child be doing here, at this hour, in this weather? Her instinct said keep driving. She'd seen too much tragedy to get tangled in another. But something inside her whispered, "Don't leave him there," and for reasons she couldn't explain. She hit the brakes. The thunder crashed again, and in that instant, she realized the boy hadn't moved an inch. Not even blinked. Amara rolled down her window, rain blowing straight into her face. "Hey, are you okay?" she shouted over the storm. No answer. The boy stood frozen, head bowed, water dripping from his hair. She parked and stepped out, pulling her hospital jacket tighter. The cold bit through her scrubs instantly. As she got closer, she saw he couldn't be older than 7. His clothes were soaked through, his feet bare and muddy. Her voice softened. "Sweetheart, where's your home?" Still no response, only the sound of rain hitting the pavement like glass. Then slowly he lifted his face. His eyes were wide, not scared but empty. The kind of emptiness that only comes from deep pain. Amara knelt down, heart pounding. "What's your name?" The boy's lips trembled. "Elijah," he whispered. The name felt old, heavy, like it had been spoken before in another time, and before she could say another word, she noticed something on his wrist. A hospital band. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But no. Under the dim glow of the bus stop light, the white wristband gleamed against his wet skin. Amara's breath caught. She leaned closer, brushing the rain aside. Printed in black ink were the words, St. Cecilia's Hospital, Elijah J., her hospital. The one she had just left. She blinked, checking again. The date on the band was today, and worse. Under assigned nurse, it said Amara Johnson. Her pulse spiked. "Where did you get this?" she asked. Elijah only looked at her and said something that sent chills crawling down her spine. "You promised you'd find me?" Amara froze. "What do you mean?" But the boy didn't reply. He simply looked up into the storm as if waiting for something above them. Lightning cracked overhead, and in its flash, for just a second, Amara thought she saw someone standing behind him. A tall figure in white. When she blinked, it was gone. Her instincts screamed to call the police, but the storm had cut power lines everywhere. Her phone showed no signal. She didn't have a choice. She grabbed her coat, wrapped Elijah inside it, and carried him to the car. He was shivering uncontrollably, lips turning blue. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, starting the engine. "We're going back to the hospital." As the car moved, the wipers squealed against the windshield. Elijah stared out at the rain, whispering to himself words Amara couldn't catch. When she turned the radio on, static filled the air. But beneath the static, a faint melody pushed through. A lullaby. Her mother used to sing that exact tune when she was little. Her grip on the wheel tightened. "Elijah," she said gently, "do you know this song?" He turned to her, eyes still empty. "You used to sing it before the fire." Amara's blood ran cold. "What fire?" she whispered. But Elijah just smiled and whispered, "You'll remember soon." By the time they reached St. Cecilia's, it was nearly midnight. The ER lights glowed warm against the dark rain. Nurse Kayla, her best friend, rushed to the car. "Girl, why are you carrying a child?" Amara explained quickly. Kayla grabbed a blanket, wrapping it around Elijah. "We'll check him in right away." But when they entered his name into the hospital system, the screen blinked red. "No record found." Kayla frowned. "That's strange. Maybe you typed it wrong?" They tried again. Same result. No patient, no ID, no digital trail. And yet, the wristband had come from this hospital, printed tonight. Amara turned the band over and noticed something else she'd missed. A small, faded blood stain on the edge. The letters EJ were carved faintly into the plastic. Kayla glanced up. "Where'd you say you found him again?" Amara hesitated. "At the old gas station on Hollow Creek Road." Kayla's face went pale. That road's been closed for years, ever since the foster home fire. While doctors checked Elijah, Amara sat nearby, her mind racing. Every few minutes she looked up and found him staring back at her. Not in fear, but like he knew her. Suddenly, Elijah began humming again. That same tune, that same haunting lullaby. Kayla nudged her. "He knows your mom's song?" Amara couldn't answer. Her chest tightened. Memories she'd buried flooding back. The sound of her mother's voice, the smell of smoke, a distant child's cry. Then Elijah looked right at her and said softly, "You kept your promise." Amara's throat went dry. "What promise?" she asked. But he only smiled, placed his tiny hand over hers, and whispered, "You'll see me again," where it all began. And just as the words left his mouth, the hospital lights flickered. Once, twice, then went completely dark. The backup generator buzzed as the hospital lights flickered back to life. Staff rushed around, resetting monitors and rebooting systems. Amara clung to the edge of the nurse's station, her pulse racing. Elijah sat calmly on the examination bed, eyes following her every move. It was as if the blackout hadn't fazed him at all. Moments later, Mr. Lewis, the security guard, hurried over. "Miss Johnson," he said quietly, "you need to see this." He led her into the small monitoring room behind the ER. The air smelled of coffee and ozone. On the screen, a black and white feed rolled. "There," Lewis pointed. "That's the boy you brought in." Amara leaned forward. On the footage, Elijah was walking through the hospital corridor, hours before she found him outside. He moved slowly, barefoot, dripping wet. At 8:17 p.m., he looked directly into the camera and smiled. "But that's impossible," Amara whispered. "I found him after 10. Mr. Lewis shrugged nervously. "Ma'am, the timestamp's correct. That kid was already here." The screen glitched. For one frame, another figure appeared behind Elijah, tall, feminine, standing right where Amara now stood. When she hurried back to the ER, Elijah was gone. The bed was empty, the blankets still warm. "Where's the boy?" she asked the nurse on duty. The woman frowned. "What boy? You mean the trauma case? He was transferred an hour ago." "No," Amara's voice cracked. "He couldn't have been. I just left him here." She ran down the hall, searching each room. Nothing. Even his wristband was missing. The hospital's corridors felt suddenly foreign, the fluorescent lights humming like whispers. Kayla caught up with her. "Amara, breathe. Maybe you're just crazy," Amara finished. "You think I'm imagining him?" Kayla hesitated, eyes full of pity. "I'm saying grief can make us see things." Amara turned away, fists trembling. "I know what I saw." Then came the intercom announcement, a calm voice saying, "Code Blue, room 209. That was the same room where Elijah had been examined. The next morning, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, the rain still falling in soft patterns. The events of the night replayed in her mind like a dream she couldn't wake from. Elijah's eyes, his voice, his words. "You promised you'd find me." Something about that phrase felt buried deep in her memory. She went to the attic and opened a box marked Mom. Inside were her late mother Martha Johnson's old photos and nurse journals from her own hospital years. One photograph stopped her heart. Her mother stood smiling beside a little boy in a striped shirt, the same eyes, the same curls, the same small smile. On the back, written in careful handwriting, Elijah, 2004. Amara stared at it, her throat tightening. The name, the face, it couldn't be coincidence. She noticed something else in the picture. The building behind them wasn't a hospital. It was the St. Mary's foster home, the one that had burned down 20 years ago. Amara's hands trembled as she picked up her phone and called Aunt Evelyn, her mother's only living sister. "Auntie," she began softly, "who's the boy with Mom in this photo?" A long silence stretched on the other end of the line. Finally, Evelyn's voice came, slow and heavy. "That's Elijah, baby. Your mama cared for him when she worked at the foster home." Amara felt the world tilt. "The one that burned down?" "Yes. The fire took 6 children. Elijah was one of them." Her chest tightened. "Then how could I see him now?" Evelyn sighed, voice breaking. "Your mama blamed herself for that fire. She said she was supposed to be watching the children that night, but she left early because you were sick. She never forgave herself." Tears blurred Amara's vision. "You think I'm seeing his ghost?" Evelyn hesitated. "I think you're seeing your mother's unfinished promise." Thunder cracked outside, and through the open window, Amara swore she heard a child's humming drift through the rain. The next morning, Amara drove to the edge of town to where the old St. Mary's foster home had once stood. The property was abandoned, fenced off, overgrown with weeds. But she found a gap in the chain link and stepped through. The charred foundation still marked the earth like a scar. Broken toys, rusted swings, half-buried shoes, relics of the night the children were lost. The rain started again, light but steady. She knelt in the mud, her heart aching. "Elijah," she whispered. "If you're out here, please, tell me why." Lightning flashed, and for a moment she thought she saw a small figure by the oak tree at the edge of the lot. She blinked. Gone. Only the sound of wind and the faint, familiar lullaby echoing through the rain. When she looked down again, something glinted near her hand. A tiny toy car, half buried in the mud. Amara picked it up, brushing away dirt. It was a red metal car, its paint chipped and faded. On the side, carved with a small hand, were the initials EJ. Her breath caught. The same initials from the wristband. The same boy from the photograph. A sudden gust of wind lifted her hair as if unseen hands brushed past. She stood slowly, clutching the toy to her chest. Then she heard it, faint and fragile, carried by the rain, a child's voice, singing the lullaby again. This time the lyrics were clear. "Mama said she'd find me. Mama said don't cry," her eyes filled. "Elijah," she called out, voice trembling. "Is that you?" But only the rain answered. And yet when she looked down again, there were small, wet footprints leading away from her, into the woods beyond the burned fence. The small footprints led away from the ruins, pressing faintly into the mud. Amara followed, clutching the toy car, her heart pounding louder than the rain. The woods were dark, the trees bending low as though listening. She kept hearing a faint humming, the same tune Elijah had sung. Each step made her feel closer to something she couldn't name. The air grew colder. The footprints ended near an old tree stump, and there, beneath the roots, she found a fragment of burnt fabric. She held it up. The corner of a child's blanket, embroidered with a single letter, E. She sank to her knees, overwhelmed. "Elijah, what are you trying to tell me?" A sudden rush of wind carried a whisper right by her ear. "You promised you'd come back." She spun around, but no one was there. Only the toy car slipped from her fingers, rolling slowly, perfectly, back toward the ruins. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The lullaby wouldn't leave her mind. She sat at her kitchen table, the toy car resting beside a flickering candle. For comfort, she opened her mother's old nursing journal again, but a folded letter slipped out from between the pages. The envelope read, "To the boy I couldn't save." Amara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, her mother's handwriting flowed with regret. "Elijah, my sweet boy, I never stopped looking for you. If forgiveness exists, may it find me through my daughter." Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks. It wasn't just a haunting, it was an unfinished love. And beneath the letter, she noticed something drawn in pencil, a small map. The outline of the St. Cecilia Hospital, and an X marked in the basement. The next evening, Amara returned to the hospital. She waited until her shift ended, and most staff had gone home. The hallways were dim, the hum of machines echoing softly. She made her way down to the basement, following the same layout from her mother's map. There, behind a storage rack, she noticed a door half covered by pipes and old supply boxes. She forced it open. The smell of dust and mildew filled the air. Inside, she found rows of old patient files stacked to the ceiling. Her flashlight beam cut across the boxes, catching faded labels. Foster care transfers, 2004. Her breath hitched. She rifled through the folders until she found one marked Elijah J. Inside, a single photo. Water damaged, showing the same boy smiling, wearing the exact striped shirt from her mother's photograph. Attached was a note in her mother's handwriting. Promised to return for him. Never did. And just as she whispered, "Mom." Why? The lights above her flickered, and a child's laughter echoed softly in the dark. Amara froze. Her flashlight dimmed, flickering weakly. The laughter turned into quiet humming. The lullaby again, surrounding her from every direction. She turned slowly. "Elijah!" A faint shadow moved between the shelves. The air grew warmer, gentle, almost peaceful. Then softly, a boy's voice. "You found my room." Her breath caught. "Where are you?" she whispered. "Here," he said, stepping into the edge of her light. Elijah stood there, dry, barefoot, smiling. "You brought my car back." Amara's voice shook. "You're real." He tilted his head. "I was. You kept your promise, Miss Amara. Now Mama can rest." The flashlight went out completely. And in the sudden dark, Amara felt a small, warm hand slip into hers. When morning came, Amara woke in the staff lounge, her head resting on her folded arms. The file, the flashlight, gone. Had it been a dream? She rose, dizzy, and walked to her locker. Inside, neatly folded, was a piece of paper. She opened it, her breath trembling. Written in childish handwriting, "Thank you for coming back. The rain doesn't hurt anymore." She pressed the note to her chest, eyes filling with tears. Kayla walked in, puzzled. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amara smiled faintly. "Maybe I did. Or maybe I just saw forgiveness." Kayla frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Amara didn't answer. She was staring at the window where tiny wet handprints faded slowly from the glass. That evening, the rain returned, soft, steady, and almost gentle. Amara drove to the cemetery where her mother Martha was buried. The toy car rested in her hand, the letter in her pocket. Kneeling at the gravestone, she whispered, "Mom, I found him. I found your boy." The wind stirred, brushing through her hair. "You can rest now. He's safe." She placed the toy beside the grave, then unfolded the letter. The ink ran slightly as raindrops touched it, but she could still read the words. "You kept your promise, Mom, and I kept mine." For a moment, the air around her grew warm, as though two souls were finally at peace. And somewhere behind her, faintly, that same lullaby rose once more, drifting through the rain like a goodbye. But when she turned to leave, she froze. A small boy was standing by the cemetery gate, smiling at her in silence. The boy by the gate didn't move. The cemetery lights flickered as thunder rolled across the clouds. Amara's breath caught. It was Elijah, the same striped shirt, the same calm expression. But this time, his eyes were filled with warmth, not sorrow. "Why are you here?" she whispered, stepping closer. He smiled faintly. "To say thank you." "She's with me now." Amara's heart thudded in her chest. "Who?" "Elijah," he said gently. "I'm not the one who was lost." "You were." A lightning flash lit the sky, and when she blinked, he was gone. Only the toy car remained, dry and shining under the rain. And then Amara saw it. The car's wheels were still spinning, even though no wind touched them. The next morning, Amara returned to her shift, trying to focus. But as she walked through the pediatric ward, she heard it again, that soft humming. The same lullaby, the same tune. She turned toward room 204, where a new patient had been admitted that morning, a small boy rescued from a roadside accident. His name tag read Elijah J., age 6. Amara's blood ran cold. She approached slowly, whispering, "Elijah." The child opened his eyes. "You look like the lady from my dream," he said, smiling faintly. Her knees nearly gave way. "Do you remember me?" He shook his head. Just the rain. You helped me cross. The monitors in the room flickered once. And for a second, Amara swore she saw another Elijah standing behind the boy, smiling, transparent, at peace. Later that night, she went to the security office to check the hospital footage from the night she first met Elijah in the rain. The guard, skeptical but kind, replayed the tape. At first, it showed Amara running out into the storm, her coat whipping in the wind, her arms stretched out. But when she knelt down to help, the frame froze. There was no boy. Just Amara, talking to empty air, holding nothing. The guard frowned. You sure you weren't alone? Amara's eyes welled with tears. No, I wasn't. She stared at the screen, at the image of herself kneeling in the rain. And for a fleeting second, lightning illuminated the footage again. This time she saw him. Elijah's reflection, standing right behind her, his small hand resting on her shoulder. The guard gasped, "Wait, rewind that!" But when he did, the reflection was gone. It rained again that evening, softly, steadily, like the sky itself was sighing in relief. Amara stood by the hospital window, watching droplets trace lines down the glass. Her heart was heavy but full. Kayla approached, carrying 2 coffees. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Still thinking about that boy?" Amara nodded. "He reminded me of something my mom used to say. The people we lose don't always leave. Sometimes they guide us home." Just then, a child's laughter echoed faintly down the hallway. Amara turned, and no one was there. But she smiled, whispering, "Goodbye, Elijah." The rain slowed, sunlight breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. A faint rainbow arched above the hospital, and in its reflection on the window, Amara saw a little boy waving, before fading into the light. But as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for finding me." A few days later, Amara cleaned her apartment and found her mother's old box of keepsakes. Inside, under faded photos and letters, was a small brown journal she had never opened before. On the first page, written in her mother's gentle handwriting, were the words, "If you ever meet Elijah, tell him I kept my promise, through you." Amara's tears blurred the ink. She turned the page and found a list of names, children her mother had helped during her years as a caretaker. Next to each one, her mother had written safe, but next to Elijah's name, it was blank. Amara smiled softly, whispering, "Now I can finish what you started, Mom." She reached for her pen and, for the first time in 20 years, filled in the empty space beside Elijah's name. One word, home. Months passed, but the rain never sounded the same again. Amara had left her night shifts behind and started something new, a nonprofit organization called the Elijah Foundation. Its mission was simple, to help lost or abandoned children find safe homes, no matter their background, race, or past. The community rallied behind her. Donations poured in. News outlets began covering her story, though Amara never spoke about the true inspiration behind it. At the foundation's opening ceremony, she stood on stage, holding the small toy car that had started it all. "Sometimes," she said, voice trembling, "the smallest act of kindness can echo across lifetimes." The crowd applauded, but as she looked toward the back of the hall, she froze. For a brief, impossible moment, she saw a boy standing there, Elijah, smiling, proud, peaceful. When she blinked, he was gone. But on the table beside her, the toy car rolled forward by itself and stopped right at her feet. It was late evening when Amara locked the foundation doors for the night. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle, steady, familiar. She stepped into it, letting the cool drops touch her face. Her heart felt light, free. The weight she'd carried for years had turned into something brighter, purpose. As thunder murmured in the distance, she whispered, "You can rest now, Elijah. You and Mom both." Lightning flashed across the sky, not frightening, but beautiful. And in that brief light, she saw 2 figures standing by the edge of the street, a woman and a child, holding hands, watching her with peaceful smiles. Amara smiled back, tears glistening in the rain. "Goodbye," she whispered. The figures slowly faded as the storm cleared, leaving a soft glow behind. The next morning, sunlight poured through her window, and the toy car on her bedside table gleamed like new, its wheels still wet, as if someone had been playing with it one last time.